She watched in horror as they circled her grandfather like wolves. The 92-year-old veteran clutched his walker, trembling not from age, but from rage he could no longer express with his fists. But what those punks didn't know was that thunder was about to roll into that parking lot. And it would teach them the difference between picking on the weak and facing the strong. It was Tuesday afternoon in Cedar Falls, Ohio. The autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves and distant rain. Sarah Martinez, 19 years old, carefully helped her grandfather out of their old Honda. Frank was 92, a Korean War veteran whose body bore the weight of 9 decades, but whose spirit still burned like fire. Every Tuesday, they made this trip to the Veterans Affairs office. Frank's monthly check wasn't much, but it was his lifeline. His gnarled hands shook as he gripped his walker, each step deliberate and proud. Sarah stayed close, her arm ready to steady him, though she knew better than to help unless he asked. Veterans don't want pity. They want dignity. "Take your time, Grandpa," she whispered, watching him navigate the cracked asphalt. Frank's jaw was set firm, his military posture intact despite the walker. To Sarah, he was still the strongest man alive. The same man who'd carried wounded soldiers across frozen battlefields, who'd earned 3 Purple Hearts and never once complained about the shrapnel still lodged in his leg. What Sarah didn't know was that this ordinary Tuesday would test everything she believed about justice and protection. They were waiting in the parking lot like scavengers. 5 young men, maybe 20 years old, with nothing better to do than cause trouble. Their leader, a tall kid with sleeve tattoos and dead eyes, spotted Frank immediately. Easy target, he must have thought. Old, slow, defenseless. Sarah's stomach tightened as she noticed them watching. She'd seen that look before, the predatory stare of people who fed on weakness. Frank was focused on his walking, counting each step, unaware of the danger circling him. The group moved closer, their laughter growing louder, more aggressive. One of them kicked a shopping cart toward Frank's path, sending it rolling dangerously close to his legs. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. "Watch where you're going, old man," the leader called out, his voice dripping with false concern. His friend snickered, forming a loose circle around Frank and Sarah. The parking lot suddenly felt like a trap. Frank stopped walking. His head lifted slightly, and Sarah saw his nostrils flare. Veterans developed instincts during war, they could smell danger like smoke on the wind. His knuckles went white against the walker's handles. "Look at this," one of them laughed, mimicking Frank's slow gait. "Probably fought in World War I, right, Grandpa?" The others roared with laughter, their voices echoing off the concrete like gunshots. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes. She wanted to scream, to tell them her grandfather had earned every gray hair, every wrinkle, every careful step. But her voice caught in her throat like broken glass. Frank's breathing grew heavy. Sarah could see the fire in his pale blue eyes, the same fire that had once stared down enemy soldiers across a frozen Korean hillside. But now that fire was trapped in a body that could no longer fight back. "Hey, did you hear me, old-timer?" The leader stepped closer, close enough that Frank could smell the cigarettes on his breath. "I asked you a question." Frank's voice came out steady, quiet, but sharp as a blade. "I heard you, son. I also heard your mama should have taught you respect." The silence stretched like a held breath. Then the laughter exploded again, meaner now, hungrier. They were enjoying this. Feeding off an old man's dignity like vultures. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for her phone. But before she could dial 911, the ground began to vibrate beneath their feet. The sound rolled in like an approaching storm. Deep, rumbling roars that seemed to shake the very air. Car alarms started chirping as chrome and black motorcycles roared into the parking lot in formation. Hell's Angels. 12 of them, riding in perfect formation, their machines gleaming like instruments of justice. The punks who'd been circling Frank suddenly looked very small, very young, and very afraid. The bikes formed a semicircle, engines growling like caged beasts. Leather jackets creaked as the riders dismounted, their boots hitting asphalt with the finality of hammer strikes. These weren't the criminals the media painted them as. These were guardians, and they'd arrived at exactly the right moment. The leader of the angels was a mountain of a man with silver hair and arms like tree trunks. Patches covered his vest, each one a story, a battle, a brother honored. His eyes swept over the scene, taking in Frank's walker, Sarah's tears, and the 5 punks who suddenly looked like they wanted to disappear. "Afternoon, Sergeant," the angel said, his voice respectful but carrying the weight of command. He'd spotted Frank's Korean War veteran cap immediately. The punk leader tried to swagger, but it came out as more of a nervous shuffle. "We're just talking to the old man," he stammered, his earlier bravado evaporating like morning mist. The silver-haired angel took a step forward. Just one step, but it might as well have been a mile. "That right?" His voice was quiet, almost conversational. "The most dangerous men never need to raise their voices." Another angel, younger but with scars that told stories of harder streets, moved to Frank's side. "Sir, these boys bothering you?" Frank straightened up as much as his old body would allow. "Nothing I can't handle," he said, though Sarah could hear the tremor in his voice. Pride warring with reality. The scarred angel nodded respectfully. "I'm sure you can, sir. But you shouldn't have to. Not at your age, not after what you've given." One of the punks tried to laugh, but it came out strangled and weak. "Come on, man, we were just joking around." The silver-haired angel's eyes went cold as winter steel. "Joking?" He pointed at Frank. "This man froze his ass off in Korea so you could have the freedom to be stupid. But stupid's got limits, and you boys just found them." Sarah watched in amazement as the mood shifted completely. The angels hadn't raised their voices, hadn't thrown a single punch, but their presence filled the parking lot like gathering storm clouds. The scarred angel crouched down slightly, bringing himself to Frank's eye level. "What unit, sir?" "2nd Infantry Division," Frank replied, his voice growing stronger. "Heartbreak Ridge." The angel's expression changed, softened with something approaching reverence. "My grandfather was 8th Army. Chosen Reservoir." He stood and turned to the punks. "You boys know what Heartbreak Ridge was?" Silence. Of course they didn't. "It was hell on earth," the angel continued. "This man climbed a mountain under enemy fire to save his squad. Lost half his hearing and still has Chinese shrapnel in his leg. But he doesn't complain. Never has." The punk leader was backing away now, his friends following like sheep. But the angels weren't done with them yet. "Here's what's going to happen," the silver-haired angel said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded respect his entire life. "You boys are going to apologize to the sergeant. Then you're going to think real hard about what kind of men you want to be." The apologies came stammered and awkward, but they came. Sarah could see the shame creeping into the punks' faces like spilled ink. They wanted to look tough, but instead they looked like what they were, cowards who picked on people who couldn't fight back. Frank accepted their apologies with a nod, his dignity intact. He wasn't interested in their humiliation, just their recognition of what they'd done wrong. As the punks slunk away toward their car, the silver-haired angel placed a gentle hand on Frank's shoulder. "Sergeant, it's an honor to meet you. Name's Marcus. Served 2 tours in Iraq before I found my brothers here." Frank's eyes brightened. The connection between warriors transcended age, war, and circumstance. "Thank you, son. But I could have handled them." Marcus smiled. "I know you could have, sir. But you shouldn't have to. Not anymore." As the angels prepared to leave, their engines rumbling like controlled thunder, Sarah found her voice. "Thank you," she called out, tears flowing freely now. Not tears of fear, but of gratitude. Marcus tipped his head toward her. "You take care of him, young lady. Men like your grandfather are the reason we can ride free." Frank gripped Sarah's arm as they watched the angels ride away, their formation perfect, their purpose clear. "Good men," he said quietly. "Doesn't matter what they wear or how they look. Good men stand up." That night, Sarah sat with her grandfather on his porch, both of them processing what had happened. The crickets sang in the darkness, and somewhere in the distance, they could hear the rumble of motorcycles. "Grandpa," Sarah said softly, "were you scared?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, the same smile he'd given her when she was little and afraid of thunderstorms. "Fear's just information, sweetheart. It tells you when something matters." Today mattered. Word of the parking lot incident spread through Cedar Falls like wildfire. In small towns, stories travel faster than gossip, and this one had everything: injustice, intervention, and redemption. The 5 punks found themselves shunned at local hangouts. Their own families heard the story and felt shame. But more importantly, the community began to look at its veterans differently. With more respect. More recognition. Frank started receiving visitors, other veterans, neighbors, people who just wanted to thank him. Sarah watched her grandfather bloom under this attention, not because he craved recognition, but because he finally felt seen. Marcus and his angels became regular sights in town, not as troublemakers but as protectors. They'd nod respectfully to Frank whenever they saw him, a silent acknowledgement between warriors. Months later, Sarah found herself thinking about that Tuesday afternoon often. She'd learned something important about strength, that it comes in many forms. Her grandfather's strength was quiet, enduring, forged in war and tempered by time. The angel's strength was protective, fierce, channeled toward justice. But the punks had learned something too. Shame can be a teacher if you let it. 2 of them eventually approached Frank at the VA office, genuinely apologetic, asking about his service. Frank, being the man he was, told them stories instead of holding grudges. Sarah realized that courage wasn't about not being afraid, it was about acting despite fear. Her grandfather had taught her that through 9 decades of quiet dignity. The angels had shown her that sometimes courage rode on 2 wheels and roared like thunder. Today, Frank is 93. He still makes those Tuesday trips to the VA office, still walks with pride despite his walker. Sarah still guides him, but now she does it with the knowledge that there are guardians watching over people like her grandfather. The angels still ride through Cedar Falls, their presence a reminder that respect isn't optional, and dignity isn't negotiable. And somewhere in that small Ohio town, 5 young men learned that real strength protects the weak, it doesn't prey on them. Frank's story became part of the town's fabric, passed down like a sacred trust. Because sometimes the most important battles aren't fought on foreign soil, they're fought in parking lots, in defense of dignity, by people who understand that freedom isn't free and respect isn't automatic. It's earned, one careful step at a time. Sometimes the most unlikely angels wear leather and ride steel horses through the storms of life. Heroes come in all forms, some with walkers, some with motorcycles, but all with hearts that refuse to let injustice win. Dignity is not determined by age. Strength is not measured by size. And courage never goes out of style.